religion of the Antichrist, the eighth beast. To arrive at a biblical conclusion, we will bring into focus the records of Daniel, John, and Paul to identify the revived empire from which the eighth beast will emerge. Once we have done that, then the religion of the Antichrist will be in plain sight. Prophetic continuity between Daniel and John. Through Nebuchadnezzar's dream of an image, 4 beasts, a ram, and a goat, God revealed to Daniel the kingdoms that would serve as a prophetic clock to the end of the world. The identity of these kingdoms would be known once they subjugate Israel, God's prophetic signpost. Except for the head of gold, Babylon, the ram and the goat, Medes and Persia and Greece, Daniel was told that it wasn't time to reveal the other kingdoms. Here's what God said to Daniel. Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Daniel 12, verse 9. John. Although God told Daniel to seal his portion of the prophetic materials, God told the Apostle John additional information to continue and explain where Daniel left off. Unlike Daniel, John was to reveal the prophetic information he got. Here's what God said to John. Seal not the sayings of the prophecy of this book, for the time is at hand. Revelation 22, verse 10. It is therefore clear that if we are to completely identify, label, and explain the image in Daniel chapter 2, the 4 beasts in Daniel chapter 7, the ram and the goat in Daniel chapter 8, we must look to the book of Revelation, the last of the prophetic books, for the synchronization, completion, and clarity of all end-time prophecy. With the help of Daniel, John, and history, it is our goal to identify and present to you the religion from which the eighth beast, the Antichrist, must emerge. The image, Daniel chapter 2, verses 32 to 35. As for this image, its head was of fine gold, its breast and its arms of silver, its belly and its thigh of brass, its legs of iron, its feet part iron and part clay. Thou sawest till a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon its feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them in pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone, Jesus, that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Daniel chapter 2, 32 to 35. From Daniel's account, the kingdoms are represented by head, gold, breast and arms, silver, belly and thigh, brass, legs, iron, and the feet, iron, mixed with clay. Daniel also saw the stone, the second coming of Jesus, who will crush these kingdoms and bring in eternity. The 4 beasts, Daniel chapter 7, 4 to 8. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made to stand upon 2 feet as of a man. And a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second like a bear, and it was raised up on one side, and 3 ribs were in its mouth, between its teeth. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, a terrible and powerful and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with its feet. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Daniel chapter 7, verse 4 to 8. From this account in Daniel chapter 7, the same kingdoms of Daniel chapter 2 are being referenced. The lion, Babylon. This lion represents Nebuchadnezzar when his sanity was restored after 7 years of living and eating with animals in the fields. The bear, Medes and Persia. The bear is leaning on one side because one kingdom was dominant than the other. The bear also had in its mouth 3 ribs. These 3 ribs represent 3 kingdoms conquered by Medes and Persia. These 3 kingdoms were Babylon, Assyria, and Egypt. The leopard. This beast represents Greece, Alexander the Great. The 4 wings speak to the speed at which he conquered the then world, and the 4 heads would be his generals. The terrible and dreadful beast. Although Daniel could not label this 4th beast, he was able to tell us that it had iron teeth and 10 horns. John said that this 4th beast of Daniel will be a merger of nations, the 8th beast. Here is John's account. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. Revelation chapter 13 verse 2. Aren't these the same kingdoms Daniel identified in Daniel chapter 7? The lion, bear, leopard, and a dragon. Daniel could not give a name to this 4th beast because it was a composition of multiple kingdoms empowered by the devil, the Antichrist, the 8th beast. The ram and goat. Daniel chapter 8 verses 20 to 22. The ram which thou sawest, that had the 2 horns, they are the kings of Media and Persia. And the rough he-goat is the king of Greece. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. And as for that which was broken, in the place whereof 4 stood up, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not with his power. Daniel 8, 20 to 22. The vision was interpreted and explained to Daniel. The ram with the 2 horns is the kingdoms of Medes and Persia. The goat with the 1 horn is the Grecian kingdom. The single horn from this Grecian kingdom would have been Antiochus, the emperor who desecrated the Jewish altar and caused the Maccabean revolt. The 8th king. In chapter 2, Daniel told us about the image of gold, silver, brass, and iron. In chapter 7, Daniel told us about the 4 beasts, the lion, bear, leopard, and one that he could not find a name for. In chapter 8, Daniel told us about the ram and the goat. In the book of Revelation, God revealed to John that the devil would manifest himself through 7 kings, but the 7th would reign 2 times, giving us a total of 8 kings. Our goal has been to identify the 7th and 8th kingdoms, the 8th beast, the Antichrist. According to John in Revelation 17, 10 and 11. And there are 7 kings. The 5 are fallen. The one is. The other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a little while. And the beast that was and is not is himself also an 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. Revelation 17, 10 and 11. Let us analyze this amazing revelation from John. First, he tells us that there were 7 kings. But 5 of the 7 kings had fallen. That is to say, they are not reigning again. Then John said the 6th king was currently reigning at the time he was writing the book of Revelation. This 6th king is the cornerstone, the critical clue to harmonize Daniel and Revelation to discover the 7th and 8th king. Here is the crown evidence. John said the 6th king was currently ruling. This 6th kingdom was none other than Rome. Rome was ruling when Christ was born. Rome was ruling when Christ was crucified. Rome was ruling when John was imprisoned on Patmos. Rome was the 6th empire. Therefore, Rome cannot be the 7th and revived 8th empire. Let us validate this with Daniel's account. The first empire was Egypt, one of the ribs conquered by the bear. The second was Assyria, one of the ribs conquered by the bear. The third was Babylon, the head of gold in chapter 2, the lion in chapter 7, who was restored after being mad for 7 years, and one of the ribs conquered by the bear. The fourth was Medes and Persia, the chest and arms in chapter 2, the bear in chapter 7, that had the 3 ribs in its mouth, and the ram with the 2 horns in chapter 8. The fifth was Greece, the belly in chapter 2, brass, the leopard in chapter 7, and the he-goat with 1 horn in chapter 8. The sixth was brass, the thigh in chapter 2. This thigh is now identified by John as Rome, the empire that was currently reigning. Take notice, in Daniel chapter 2, the chest and arms were both silver, a horizontal kingdom, because Medes and Persia shared the empire at the same time, therefore chest and arms. However, although the belly and thigh were both brass, they did not reign at the same time. That is to say, the belly above would rule before the thigh below. That is why Greece and Rome were called the Greco-Roman Empire. Rome governed Israel after the Grecian kingdom. So John told us that the sixth empire was Rome, which was the brass thigh of Daniel chapter 2. But Rome wasn't the last king, because John said, "They are 7 kings. The 5 are fallen, the one is, the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a little while, and the beast that was and is not is himself also an 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition." This is Revelation chapter 17, 10 and 11. According to John, after the kingdom of Rome, another king, the 7th, would appear, reign for a while, leave the scene, then return as the 8th king, the 8th beast, the Antichrist. Let us go back to Daniel. In chapter 2, Daniel said that the leg of the image was made of iron, which is John's 7th king. Daniel also said that the foot of the image was made of iron mixed with clay. Remember that John said the 7th king would reign 2 times, and Daniel agrees. The leg is of iron, the 7th king, and the feet is part iron, the 8th king. This 7th and 8th beast would be the terrible and dreadful beast with 10 horns that Daniel could not describe in chapter 7. Therefore, Rome, the 6th kingdom, cannot be the revived 8th empire, because it is the 7th empire that returns as the 8th. The Antichrist, the 8th beast, cannot rise out of Rome but from the 7th empire. To discover the 7th empire, we must turn to history that has been so kind to preserve the evidence to point fingers at Islam. Pope Urban II declared war in the year 1095 to take back the Holy Land from Islam. Incidentally, this unholy war was called the Crusade, which means to kill Muslims. To win souls for God, Christians should have evangelistic meetings, not crusades. For that word, crusade, will come back to haunt Christianity in the future. Let's get back. After the First World War, and by 1924, the Islamic Empire was struck a deadly wound, just as John prophesied in Revelation chapter 13. "And I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns were 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast." Revelation 13, 1 and 3. The 7th king, Islam, is back today and is on the rise and will become the 8th empire, the 8th king, the religion from which the Antichrist, the 8th beast, must emerge. Daniel informs us that the feet of the image were iron mixed with clay. What we know is that Israel is the only nation God refers to as clay, miry clay or potter's clay. Therefore, the clay is apostate Israel, the harlot of Revelation chapter 17. John tells us that Israel will become the chief ally of the Antichrist. "I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns." Revelation 17 verse 3. This relationship between the iron and the clay, the woman and the beast, Israel and Islam will give the Antichrist the express privilege to sit in a temple in Israel and declare himself to be God. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3 and 4. Roman Catholicism has never been an empire. Do you think the Pope of Rome, in his right mind, could leave the Vatican to sit in a temple in Israel and declare himself to be God in Israel? Do you think that Israel will allow a foreigner to sit in any of its temple? Daniel tells us that the Antichrist must appear from an Abrahamic religion, and the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all. Daniel 11, verse 36 and 37. The Antichrist will disregard the God of his fathers. There are only three fathers in the Bible, the patriarchs: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. There are only three Abrahamic religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The records of Daniel and John shows that the revived empire will be Islam. The religion of the Antichrist is Islam. The eighth beast must emerge from Islam. Thank you for listening.